The actual restoration process here with Active Directory can come in one of two very different flavors. There is on one side what is called the authoritative restore, and on the other we have the non-authoritative restore. These are used for different purposes. The non-authoritative restore is used generally in a situation where you have a failed Active Directory domain controller, where you want that DC to then receive via replication all the different bits of the Active Directory as part of its natural replication cycle. In a non-authoritative restore, the whole point behind it is that you don't have any records that need to be passed outward from this domain controller you're restoring. You only want to receive the records that are coming inward. Now, in other circumstances, you may find that something has been removed from Active Directory. Active Directory may be corrupted for one reason or another. And so you need to restore Active Directory and then make that then the authoritative copy of the objects that exist in Active Directory. It is in that situation where you perform an authoritative restore. Now, you shouldn't necessarily get too hung up on the names here, because what we're going to go through is the process of doing a non-authoritative restore and then setting objects as authoritative for the ones that have been inadvertently removed from Active Directory. So this example will in fact demonstrate both the non-authoritative side and the authoritative side of any kind of Active Directory restore that you need to accomplish. So let's actually minimize this and come back to our server here where we've done that backup of Active Directory. It is this backup that gives us the ability to then recover Active Directory from the bits that have been stored here on our other hard drive. But let's assume, for example, that after the backup completed, somebody came in here and for one reason or another, whether accidentally or maliciously, some user came in here and actually removed the Jason Helmick account. Oh my gosh, I've deleted the user Jason Helmick. And maybe they even went one step further and deleted an OU called Test Computers for WSUS. Oh no, the whole organizational unit has been removed. Now, this is a pretty bad day, especially if that organizational unit was full of computer or user accounts. And so recovering all of those could be a relatively long process. But remember, we actually have that ability, because we have that Active Directory snapshot, to go backwards in time and figure out exactly which user accounts and which organizational units were removed. Let's assume that we've already gone through that process to figure out which ones were deleted. And we know that we have one user account and one organizational unit to then recover. In order to start this process, we actually need to first reboot the computer into Directory Services Restore mode. And if you recall, that's one of the reasons why we went through that DSRM password activity earlier on in this module, because in order to get ourselves into Directory Services Restore mode, we need to know what the password's going to be. Now, DSRM, there's a couple of ways in which you can get to it. One of the ways that's easiest is by running msconfig and shifting over here to the boot tab, and then reconfiguring ourselves to reboot into safe boot in Active Directory repair mode. If you set that, that will actually reboot the machine into Directory Services Restore mode, which, because Active Directory is now dismounted, will allow us to access the backup and recover using a non-authoritative restore. So let's hit the OK button here and then restart the machine so that it will come back online in DSRM mode. And then accelerating things to the other end of the reboot, let's go ahead and log back in using that DSRM password. I'm going to log in here as the administrator for this machine. In fact, you could really use /administrator if you wanted to. And then the DSRM password here. So that's the password I have for my domain. This will log me in, as you can see, in safe mode. This is DSRM safe mode here. That will allow us to then complete this non-authoritative restore. Now, we could do that with the graphical user interface for Windows Server Backup, but I think I'd rather show you the command line approach that you can use for accomplishing this task as well. Let me come in here and bring up an elevated command prompt once again so that we can now take a look at the command lines you'll use for actually interfacing with Windows Server Backup. One of the first things we need to do, actually let me just clear the screen here so that we've got plenty of real estate, is to do wb-admin, which is the command line that interfaces with Windows Server Backup, and then just to get the different copies of the backups that currently exist on this machine. So wb-admin get versions will identify which copies or which backups are currently on this machine and are identified here with a version identifier, which let me go ahead and mark that here so we can make use of it later. This can be used, as you can see here, to recover the volume, files, applications, bare metal recovery, and the system state. What we now need to do is perform a non-authoritative restore using this backup. In order to do that, we use wb-admin, then start, and then system state recovery dash version, and then the identifier for the version that we want to use, which is that 3/27/2015 at, what is that, 2:08 p.m. If I run this, this will go about kicking off that system state recovery. So let me actually get it going here. Notice here that this will cause all the replicated content on the local computer to resynchronize after the recovery. Essentially, this is a non-authoritative restore. So you have to restore the objects so that they can then be overwritten by the actual authoritative objects that exist in the rest of Active Directory on all the other Active Directory domain controllers. That's the important difference between a non-authoritative restore and an authoritative restore, is the fact that you have to have those objects so that you can just have a functioning database in place so that your inbound replication from other domain controllers can ensure that it has the most appropriate and most recent copy of the database. Let me choose yes here to go ahead and continue. And let's actually go through the process of doing that system state recovery. Depending on the size of your Active Directory domain, this could take a pretty extensive period of time. Sometimes these actual databases can be very large in size.